Welcome back to World Talks. Here with me, Anna Kalczyńska. And let's focus on white paper for European defense. As United States' commitment to European security cannot be taken for granted anymore, the European leaders seem to have comprehended that the maintenance of peace in Europe requires investment, unity and decisive action. Yesterday, the European leaders adopted a white paper on EU defense, which maps path for EU rearmament. So let's get to specifics with Professor Paweł Wojciechowski, former Polish finance minister. Good morning, Professor. Thank you for joining us this morning here on TVP World. So the European Union has finally developed a defense strategy, something that has been lacking for many, many years. On Wednesday, the European Commission published the document known as the White Paper on EU Defense, outlining this strategy and the path to its implementation. So what are actually the key elements of this strategy?
Well, first of all, I would like to say that the speed of the European Union in proposing this rearmament concept is very impressive, and it's like a major, shift in terms of providing papers, providing concepts. It just happened 2 weeks after, the U.S. announced that would stop the military aid to Ukraine, and it was announced, and 2 weeks later we have a white paper, and now the European Council is discussing it. So it's really very big shift in terms of concept. First of all, we need stronger military, more reliable. So we need to boost military spendings in Europe. That's obvious. And how to do it? First, it's a financial arm, and there's several concepts of it. One, of course, is a 150 billion euro concept of mutual debt of the EU that was a financing of loaning money to member states. So member states would get the money from the European Union, which would be backed by the European Commission. Mm-hmm. And of course, all is in detail, we can discuss it later. But the idea is that we would do it very fast, because all the projects have to be developed within half a year. Like, for example, Eastern Shield, for Donald Tusk is advocating for Poland, which takes about 2.5 billion euro. Okay, so it's the first element. It's just let's do it fast.
Okay, so
and in those gaps that we have. Second element, of course, is another one, which is 50 billion euro that would be provided from European Investment Bank. And it's based on the assumption that that we would have also some changes in so-called escape clause. Mm-hmm. For allowing member states to finance more armaments without going into the trouble with fiscal rules.
All right, but is the European industry ready for that? I mean, we had at least 3 years to prepare. Now you say we have 6 months to ramp up, but Brussels insists that EU does not aim to replace NATO. At the same time, we see some level of protectionism. It says by European. So is this industry capable of providing those weapons?
That's the biggest problem, okay, because it's very fragmented. In Europe, European Union, you have 19 types of tanks. In Poland is is a country which has the most different types of tanks, 5 of them. Between K2 and Abrams, Leopards. So in fact, it's very fragmented. The industry is very fragmented. You need interoperational solution to work all of those equipment, and then one of the elements is that we need to base this development of interoperability in Europe. For example, so the U.S. will not be able to say, well, you have the equipment, but you don't have the codes to operate. So that's one element. Second element is, of course, that we have to have, the national component, the country's component of the European Union. So by European, 65% of that has to be produced in the EU. And then, of course, in those very important elements that actually the EU has the biggest gaps, in terms of military defense capabilities, which is air missile, ammunition, drone, and some, AI technology, quantum technologies. So all of it would be together, kind of goes together with the European plan for building up the industry. The industry would need to be coherent, has to be consolidated, has to think together, that we would use the money from those loans from the EU, but at the same time would benefit the whole European economy as well. Because if you would buy the arms only from the United States, the multiplier effects, because this is export to the United States and imports to the EU, would benefit the American economy, not the European economy. So on one side you have this rearmament, development, and very more consolidated manner, and also some fiscal stimulus for the European economy.
Exactly. So we hear about engaging the private sector in arms production. EU leaders want to mobilize the private capital rather than rely solely on the taxpayers' funding. But how can this be done?
This can be done in the second element of this concept, which is to mobilize the money by the concept of a savings and investment union. Because we save a lot in the European Union, but the money goes abroad as far as investment. So we want to mobilize that and provide a more common ground for investments in Europe, and then that this would be operated by European Investment Bank. We're talking about the scale of new additional funding in 4 years of around 650 billion euro. No, Europe spends now about 320 billion euro on defense, which is about half of the US. The biggest ones is, of course, Germany, 65 billion euro. Poland's about 21 billion euro. But again, it's number one in terms of proportion of spendings to the GDP. So we want to do the following. We want to, first of all, think about that we have to have a stimulus to the armament, to military buildup and industrial buildup from the EU funding. Potentially, there's a discussion about also moving the cohesion funds to that goal. And second one, to mobilize other borrowing capabilities through EIB and private funding as well.
And how about this exempting the spending from excessive debt rules? That was proposed by the Commission. How do you assess this?
Well, this escape clause is called. It's a breakthrough in terms of thinking about how to spend money, because of course, for example, Poland and many other countries have the excessive debt procedure, and they have a limit of 3% deficit to GDP and 60% debt to GDP. This is like a main framework, and we have to lower the deficits year by year over 4 years to lower it down. Now the idea is that we would be able to spend more on defense, and it will be excluded from that measurement of the deficits, about 1.5% of GDP. But of course, the devil is in detail, okay, still to come. And Minister Domański, who's a Polish finance minister, together with Paweł Wojciechowski, deputy finance minister, will be discussing what constitutes the investments in defense. For example, not only the arms, but also maybe munition, training, and dual use, maybe some spendings. So the idea is to allow more fiscal space to ramp up investments.
Professor, and shortly, as we have to wrap up, you mentioned that cohesion fund could be used for the military purposes now. So do you think that will the Eastern European countries feel the strain here and, well, even recession due to possible, reshifting of? Yes,
that concerns the poor countries, the eastern and the southern countries. Southern countries, of course, Giorgia Meloni from Italy said, "Wow, no way." But please remember, the cohesion countries are mostly in the national envelopes. So, for example, in Poland, there's a Resilience Recovery Fund. It's called KPO, and that fund already Poland applied to the European Union to shift that money to military spending. So depends on the countries. Some countries have probably ideas that defense is more important, like in the eastern flank, and some other countries would say, well, let's keep the money and we'll use it for cohesion policies.
Professor, thank you so much for providing your expertise here and to clarify a bit those complex issues. Paweł Wojciechowski, former Polish finance minister, was the guest of TVP World.
Thank you very much.
So much. And that concludes this edition of World Talks. Stay tuned to TVP World for more.